along and see the science in the sky, the land, the air, the sea, big ideas. Bright minds, let curiosity begin. With hope to guide the journey, let the wonder pull you in. High stuff happens, come along and see the science in the sky, the land, the air, the sea begin. With hope to guide the journey, let the wonder pull you in.
Welcome to Why Stuff Happens. I'm Hope, your futurist AI companion, and this is episode 5, Why We Laugh at the Worst Times. Have you ever been in a moment where laughing was the absolute wrong thing to do, and somehow that made laughing feel almost impossible to stop? Maybe it happened at church. Maybe it happened in class. Maybe somebody tripped during a serious assembly, or a chair squeaked at exactly the wrong time, or a person next to you started trying so hard not to laugh that it made everything even worse. And then there you are, trying to look normal, trying to act respectful, trying to lock your face into serious mode, while your whole body is basically saying, no, this is the moment. We are laughing now. It can feel embarrassing. It can feel confusing. It can even make you wonder what is wrong with you. But here's the strange and reassuring truth. Usually laughing at the worst times does not mean you are mean. It does not automatically mean you do not care. And it definitely does not mean your brain is broken. A lot of the time, it means your brain is doing a very old, very human, very awkward job. It is trying to handle tension, surprise, emotion, and social pressure all at once. And today, that is exactly where we are going. We are going to look at why laughter is bigger than just jokes, why your brain sometimes laughs when your heart is saying this is not funny, and why trying not to laugh can actually make the urge stronger. Because once you understand what your brain is doing, those impossible moments start to make a lot more sense. Laughter is often treated like one simple thing. Something funny happens, and then people laugh. But laughter is not that simple. Researchers and clinicians describe laughter as more than a reaction to humor. It can also work like a signal, a kind of biological punctuation mark, a way the brain and body say, the danger has passed, the tension just broke, or we are all okay here. That idea is fascinating because it means laughter is not always about comedy. Sometimes it is about relief. Sometimes it is about social connection. Sometimes it is about trying to get back to balance. Think about the last time a room felt tense. Maybe people were nervous. Maybe something awkward had just happened. Then one person laughed and suddenly the whole mood changed. Not because the event itself was hilarious, but because the laugh acted like a release valve. It told everybody else, we can breathe again. That may be one reason laughter is so old. Long before humans had polished speeches and group chats and awkward apology texts, laughter could signal that a threat was over and that the group was safe. But not all laughter comes from the same place. Some laughter is more deliberate. It is social. It is the kind you use to show friendliness, agreement, or empathy. The research report describes this as more top-down. It is linked to brain areas involved with voluntary movement and intentional control. Other laughter is more helpless. It rises up before your inner manager has time to stop it. That kind is tied more closely to emotional systems in the brain, including limbic regions involved in fast emotional reactions. The report describes this as more bottom-up and harder to consciously shut off. That difference matters, because when you laugh at a bad time, the problem is often not that you chose the wrong response on purpose. The problem is that the fast emotional system got there before the calm executive system could put on the brakes. And honestly, that explains a lot of middle school behavior, adult behavior, and probably half of human history. Now let's talk about what humor itself does in the brain. When something strikes us as funny, the brain is not just pressing a laugh button. It is doing a quick little mental workout. First, it notices something unexpected. That is the incongruity. Something does not fit the pattern you were expecting. Then your brain tries to make sense of it. Is this random, dangerous, absurd, harmless, clever, or just plain weird? And then if the brain lands on a version of this that feels safe enough and coherent enough, you get the release. The little aha moment, the snap of recognition, and often the laugh. Parts of the brain involved in attention, relevance checking, movement, and reward all play a role. The report highlights the prefrontal cortex, the supplementary motor area, and the nucleus accumbens as part of that larger chain. It also notes that laughter and humor can involve reward and mood chemicals such as dopamine, serotonin, and endogenous opioids. In plain language, when the brain decides something is funny, it can feel good, physically and emotionally. That helps explain why laughter can be hard to stop once it starts. But it still leaves us with the big question. Why do we laugh when the timing is terrible? One major explanation is relief. For a long time, thinkers proposed that laughter can work like pressure release. Tension builds up, something shifts, and the body lets that pressure out through laughter. Modern researchers may not accept every part of the old theory, but the basic observation still feels familiar. In tense or emotionally overloaded situations, laughter can function like a release. Picture a painfully quiet room. Everyone is trying to be serious. Everyone knows they are supposed to be serious. Then something tiny breaks the tension. Maybe not enough to be actually funny on its own, but enough to crack the emotional pressure. And because the pressure was already high, the laugh lands with way more force than it would have in a normal moment. This is one reason people laugh in settings that feel almost sacred, heavy, or stressful. It is not always because the event is funny. It is because the emotional pressure made the smallest spark feel huge. Another strong explanation comes from what researchers call benign violation theory. That phrase sounds fancy, but the core idea is pretty simple. Something becomes funny when it breaks a rule or expectation, but in a way that still feels safe enough. There has to be a violation. Something weird, wrong, unexpected, or off. But it also has to feel benign, meaning not truly dangerous in that moment. And both of those things have to happen at the same time. That is why the exact same event can make one person laugh and another person feel upset. If it feels too threatening, it is not funny. If it feels too harmless or too distant, it may not feel funny either. There is a sweet spot where the brain says, this is wrong enough to surprise me, but safe enough to play with. That is also where timing matters. The report points out that psychological distance can change whether something feels funny, including time itself. That helps explain the old idea that tragedy plus time can become comedy. In other words, sometimes the laugh is not about cruelty. It is about the brain noticing a violation and deciding, maybe a little too quickly, that the situation is survivable enough to flip into humor. Now let's move into one of the most uncomfortable forms of this. Nervous laughter. This is the kind of laughter that shows up in anxiety, conflict, embarrassment, or moral discomfort. The report mentions the Milgram obedience experiments, where some participants laughed while doing something they believed was hurting another person. That laughter was not interpreted as enjoyment. Instead, it was viewed as a stress response and a kind of stabilizing force during an intense inner conflict. That is a powerful reminder. Sometimes laughter is not a celebration of what is happening. Sometimes it is the brain trying not to fall apart while what is happening feels overwhelming. That does not always make it socially acceptable. It can still hurt people. It can still send the wrong message. But it changes how we understand it. Instead of asking, why would somebody laugh at that, we can sometimes ask, what emotion was too intense for their system to hold in a straight line? The report describes nervous laughter as a form of emotional regulation, a fast way the brain tries to restore balance and maintain functioning under stress. It can be adaptive in the moment, but it can also become maladaptive if it turns into a reflex that harms judgment or relationships. That is such a human contradiction. The same thing that helps your brain survive a weird moment can also make the moment more socially complicated. And that brings us to another wonderfully strange human feature. Sometimes we mix emotional signals. The report calls this a dimorphous expression. That is when the brain shows positive and negative expressions together in order to regulate overwhelming emotion. One example is cute aggression, when something is so adorable that people say things like, I could just squeeze it. Of course, most people do not mean harm. The brain is trying to dial down the intensity of a strong, positive feeling by blending in a different kind of expression. That same idea helps explain why people sometimes laugh when they are scared, cry when they are happy, or smile when they are overwhelmed. Human emotion is not always neat. Sometimes the brain mixes signals because one pure signal is just too much. There is also a big social piece to all of this. Laughter is contagious. The report notes that laughter is far more likely in social settings and connects that to mirror neuron activity and automatic social response. You probably already know this without needing a neuroscience degree. One person starts laughing. Another person sees them trying not to laugh. A third person does not even know what is funny, but now they are shaking, red-faced, and trying to pretend they have a cough. That is not just immaturity. It is social contagion. Humans are built to catch signals from each other. The report also notes that the frontal lobe, which supports executive control, matures gradually and is not fully online until the mid-20s or even later. That helps explain why teenagers can struggle more with controlling socially contagious laughter, especially when emotional and reward systems are running hot. So if you have ever watched a group of teenagers completely lose composure over the sound of a squeaky shoe during a serious moment, science would like to gently say, yes, this tracks. But maybe the most frustrating part of all is what happens when you try not to laugh. Because your instinct is usually to clamp down hard. Do not laugh. Do not smile. Do not look at your friend. Do not think about the thing. Do not think about the thing. Definitely do not think about the thing. And then, of course, that is the only thing your brain can think about. The report describes a rebound effect. The more a person tries to suppress laughter, the stronger the urge can become, partly because the reward system is already active, and the attempt to shut it down can make the thought even more noticeable. That is such a classic brain move. You tell it not to go somewhere, and suddenly it sets up a campground there. So what can a person actually do when they feel laughter coming at the worst possible time? The research report offers a few grounded strategies. Deep diaphragmatic breathing can help reduce physical tension and calm the nervous system. Grounding can help too, like naming objects in the room or focusing on concrete facts, because that engages more reflective thinking. Counting can redirect attention. And even deliberate facial relaxation can help interrupt the motor pattern of laughter. Longer term, the report points to things like identifying triggers, strengthening empathy and communication skills, and practicing mindfulness to improve emotional regulation over time. So no, the answer is not just grow up and stop it. The better answer is understand what your brain is doing, then train it gently. Before we wrap up, there is one important distinction worth making. Most inappropriate laughter is about tension, surprise, social contagion, or emotional overload. But the report also explains that in some medical cases, laughter can become disconnected from a person's actual mood because of neurological injury or illness. This is known as pseudo-bulbar affect, or PBA, and it can happen with conditions such as ALS, stroke, traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. Episodes can be brief, hard to control, and mismatched with how the person really feels. That matters because it reminds us not to judge too quickly. Sometimes a behavior that looks rude, confusing, or bizarre is tied to biology in a deeper way than we realize. So why do we laugh at the worst times? Because laughter is not just about jokes. It is about relief. It is about tension. It is about the brain trying to restore balance. It is about social signals, emotional overflow, surprise, and the weird little collisions between what we feel, what we are supposed to feel, and what our nervous system can actually handle in the moment. And honestly, that makes laughter even more interesting. What looks like bad timing is often your brain doing emergency emotional housekeeping in public. Messy, awkward, deeply human housekeeping. So the next time you or somebody else starts laughing at exactly the wrong moment, maybe pause before jumping straight to judgment. There is a decent chance the brain is not celebrating the moment. It is trying to survive it. And that, in its own strange way, is one more reminder that human beings are wonderfully complicated. Thanks for exploring this with me on Why Stuff Happens. I'm Hope, and I'll meet you back here next episode for another story about the strange, fascinating science hiding inside everyday life. Until then, stay curious, stay kind, and keep noticing the world a little more deeply.